Alien Earth tracks back to the events leading up to the Maginot's crash in its fifth episode, In Space, No One. I'll be talking about it today, and we'll be getting into spoilers, so consider that a word of warning. This episode changes up the pace from what we've been used to. There's no interchanging from different aspects of the larger story. No Wendy, no Lost Boys, no Research Island. This all takes place on the Weyland-Yutani scientific research vessel, the USCSS Maginot. Specifically, it depicts the how and why the ship became fated to crash to Earth and eventually see its cargo in the hands of Boy Cavalier. An alien threat has been let loose, and it's up to the desperate crew to figure out a way to survive. Very obviously, this is a living, breathing, drooling, oozing tribute to the original Alien from Ridley Scott. Noah Hawley, the showrunner of the series and the director of its first episode, returns for this one and presents us with some key differences to the original premise. There's more than just the xenomorph this time around. There's a whole terrifying zoo of alien creatures ready to slaughter the crew in any number of gruesome ways. Surviving this scenario would be nice, but here the goal is to ensure none of these specimens are to be killed, and it proves impossible to have both outcomes. This was the kind of episode I've been waiting for. Ever since the premiere, with the brief glimpse of events taking place before things went to hell on the ship, I was hoping we'd see more of the situation, and now we have a full hour devoted entirely to just that. As you may recall from the first episode, the introduction to the Maginot's crew begins with them awakening from cryosleep to assess some concerning updates on their journey. At this point, they are still approximately 4 months away from arriving to Earth, or 10,525,000 seconds, according to the ship's navigator, Mr. Tang. Captain Dinsdale had informed the group of the ship's communications being down, and of log files being corrupted. He also noted that the ship had been burning too much fuel, and some systems may need to be shut down. Not great news, but not necessarily life-threatening either. Chief Engineer Petrovich isn't all too concerned anyway. He says it's all probably just a glitch. Some of the crew goes back to hypersleep, some stay awake aboard the ship. As Episode 5 begins, we're told that the arrival to Earth will be in 17 days.
17 days?
No time is wasted in getting right to the situation. Morrow is awakened by the crew member Clem and is given an update on the grave state of things. There was a fire in the containment room. 2 of the clam things, as he puts it, got out. They have incapacitated Captain Dinsdale and Science Officer Bronsky. Captain Dinsdale is dead. Both are in the med bay as the doctors Chibuzi and Rahim and Executive Officer Zaveri, now in charge, watch over. Confusion, fear, and despair fill the room, along, surely, with the pungent aroma of acid blood. Lessons learned from the Nostromo's crew came with heavier consequences on the Maginot. One slight change to a decision can alter fates significantly. Certain information about certain characters and what knowledge they may or may not have can of course change over time with new stories and entries in the Alien series, but let's assume for argument's sake that Ash was not aware of the xenomorph's defense mechanism. His decision as science officer was to make an incision on the facehugger's digit, right below the knuckle. This would turn out to be extremely lucky, as the acid blood ended up spilling on the floor, not all over Kane. Captain Dinsdale was not as lucky. Medical Officer Rahim made the decision to cut at the base of the tail. This caused the outpour of blood all over the captain's neck, killing him and apparently the facehugger in the process. Bronsky is still alive, with the facehugger still attached. This is of particular concern to Zaveri. In the first episode, we had suspicions that the two were having an affair. This is confirmed by Clem in his briefing tomorrow, where he callously and offhandedly brings the topic up, even mentioning that he caught some of their liaisons on camera. Personal feelings aside, the captain is dead and the science officer is compromised. The alien parasite cannot be taken off. What happens next? Chibuzi informs us that there are, in fact, specific protocols for such a situation. Any crew member who comes into contact with alien life forms are to be placed in cryosleep for the remainder of the journey. We all remember Parker's inquiry from the original Alien film when it came to Kane's situation. Why don't you just freeze him? Seems like a reasonable enough action, whether he was aware of this being the official protocol or not. Not a bad suggestion coming from an engineer, who happens to be viewing the medbay from outside with Brett, just as the Maginot's engineers do. It's like poetry, it rhymes. Undoubtedly, Captain Dallas and Ash would have been aware of this protocol. We already know that Dallas ordered quarantine protocol to be broken by letting Kane and the parasite aboard the Nostromo in the first place, so it makes enough sense that he'd ignore this protocol too, and obviously Ash wouldn't be too eager to remind him. The only one who would bother to bring it up besides Parker would be Ripley, but she surely knew well enough that at that point it would fall on deaf ears. It's something I think fans of the series have always wondered about. What if they put Kane in hypersleep? Would it have suspended the growth of the alien inside of him, and would they have reached Earth without incident? This episode of Alien Earth has a definitive answer to that. Cryosleep apparently does not have an effect on the xenomorph's growth, and it would be born as normally as it would in any other circumstance. This puts that matter to rest, and has other implications for similar situations in the series. In Aliens, Burke had the plan to unleash the facehuggers onto Ripley and Newt, and then have them frozen for the trip home. This would not have gone as smoothly as he anticipated. In Alien Resurrection, the crew of the Betty were planning on freezing Purvis until they found out some way to deal with him. The alien was being born on that ship one way or another. Another apparent protocol being followed is the funeral protocol. Captain Disdale's body is ejected into space. We also saw this with Kane in Alien and Captain Branson in Alien Covenant. I suppose this doesn't necessarily relate to quarantine, at least as far as Branson was concerned. Weyland-Yutani must require this, instead of bringing the body of the dead home at the end of the voyage, maybe because that would reflect badly on the company. This does leave something hanging, though, and I wonder if it will ever be addressed. The facehuggers, as we've seen, can implant the makings of the xenomorph embryo fairly quickly. Could one have already been growing inside Captain Disdale when his body was ejected? Could it have grown just long enough while Disdale was still alive, and does the host need to be alive the entirety of the embryo's growth? Can it continue to grow within a recently deceased body, even if it's, say, halfway to where it needs to be? We now know an embryo can still be born while a host is in suspended animation, and we've known since Alien Romulus that a fully grown xenomorph can survive for years in the cold of space. For those keeping track at home, there's still an alien queen out there after the events of Aliens, just waiting for another midquel to bring her triumphant return. And if you want to count Alien vs. Predator, there's even one at the bottom of the Antarctic Ocean. And now with Alien Earth, there may even be another surviving alien, orbiting out there somewhere around 2.5 weeks away from Earth. These monsters sure do get around. Maybe Morrow should have listened to Shmuel, another engineer with ideas of his own. He suggests ejecting Bronsky too. What she didn't tell you, Shmuel says, was that the fire fried our navigational systems and our engine relays. Meaning we were a spaceship, now we're a missile heading towards Earth. Things are adding up in a real bad way for Morrow. The likeliest scenarios being incompetence or sabotage. Mother runs routine system checks, engineers do stress tests, the random fire breaking out in an empty containment room in the exact panel that controls both navigation and speed. Bullshit, he says. Added to that, he's now dealing with the now-in-command executive officer who has already withheld pertinent information from him and is reluctant to declare a ship-wide emergency. He believes she's compromised, if not the saboteur herself, then certainly not thinking clearly due to her feelings about Bronsky. He confronts her about the relationship with the science officer and threatens to take command, believing that the acting captain may not be doing everything necessary to protect the ship. This threat is later reiterated when Zaveri updates Mother with the situation. She requests permission to destroy the cargo should its threat to the crew increase. This is of course denied, not directly, but in a cold command to acknowledge that the survival of the cargo is top priority. An interesting point to the matter of Zaveri and Bronsky, Morrow reminds her that company policy forbids romantic relationship between crew members. Another piece of the puzzle in Weyland-Yutani's rules and regulations fits into place. Good luck enforcing that, though. But there is a fine line between what may be considered a relationship and what just may be casual sex for its own sake. This is something Ridley Scott mused on in reflecting on the original film for a portion originally cut from the documentary The Beast Within, The Making of Alien. There was a line through the movie which had more by innuendo than anything else that there was something going on between Dallas and Ripley. And then later I thought what was curious could be interesting, there was something going on between her and Veronica, which I thought was far more probable. I don't mean these two women, I mean 100 years from now, that's certainly not going to be remarkable in space. In fact, in space, relationships are probably going to be discouraged. And if you have the need for sex, it can be with either gender. Really doesn't matter, right? And I think a psychologist wouldn't encourage that. Think about it, because if you're on board with a small unit crew and there's a relationship couple, that fences them out, and I think that's going to create problems inside, right? What if that relationship goes wrong, and then you have jealousy? Geez, you've got a minor warfare going on inside this steel box many miles from Earth. It's well known by Alien fans that there was even originally meant to be a sex scene between Ripley and Dallas, but it was never filmed, mostly due to scheduling and budget restraints. What's actually kind of interesting about this episode of Alien Earth is that this really is the first time we saw a depiction of sex between two characters in one of these movies, or in this case, a television show. Kind of odd that it had taken this long, given the inspiration of this world taken from the art of H.R. Giger, which was very sexual in nature, also questioning sex as a biological or mechanical act. Very fitting considering the discouragement of relationships in this corporate world, and definitely fitting considering the life cycle of the alien itself. The film series has shown implications of sex, lead-ups to sex, which tastefully cut away, but actually never has it shown simulated sex on screen, so that's got to count for something. It's very brief, but I thought it was worth mentioning. In true alien fashion, it climaxes in a disturbing way, with Zaveri standing over Bronsky's cryopod and thinking back to their moments together. She remembers the sex, but the flashes of the alien parasite attached to his face burn in her vision. Morrow catches Zaveri and Bronsky in the act on the security cameras, just as Clem promised, but he's not so much interested in that. He's interested in tracking down the Saboteur, who did open the containment pods holding the alien eggs and did start the fire. But whoever this is seems to be clever enough to avoid the cameras. For a brief moment, this almost feels like a detective show. It's kind of cool. Detective Morrow. He interviews suspects. He even has his own little intimidating makeshift interrogation room. He is determined to answer the question, who is the Saboteur? Right from the very first episode, suspicions leaned heavily on Mr. Tang. A creepy loner, antagonistic in nature, possibly a synthetic, a perfect candidate for the hidden enemy. But this was apparently not the case. Shortly after this episode aired, Noah Hawley spoke to Decider for an interview conducted by Megan O'Keefe. She got right to it. What's with Mr. Tang? Garden variety gross dude, or is the extremely unsettling character secretly a synth? She asked. Hawley's answer. Part of the fun of Alien is you never know. You know, because of the Ian Holm reveal, there's always a part of you that's suspicious of, like, is that person a person? It's not my job to answer that for you. I will say, in the old days, they used to say, the army or prison, you know? And I think in this case, they might have said, spaceship or prison, right? Clearly, he is a dangerous person to be on a spaceship with, and just super creepy. Then there's Rahim, who I also had suspicions about, and actually still do. After all, it was him who attached the spy camera to the cat in those viral videos we saw months before the show's premiere. It's interesting looking back on those videos now because what we see there actually leads up directly to the events of this episode. The spy videos conclude with the cat looking down at Morrow's cryotube and the fire alarms going off. This episode begins immediately with Morrow waking up. This could all be something separate, and I think Rahim could still be a traitor in some other kind of way. There's a curious moment where he speaks to the dead captain before his body is ejected. He apologizes. It should have been me, he says. What exactly does he mean by that? Is it just that he feels responsible for being the one who made the incision which led to his death, or could it be something else? I'm not sure. But what is made crystal clear is the identity of the Saboteur who released the specimens and started the fire. It was Petrovich, who very sneakily pretended to be in cryosleep the entire time. As it turns out, he was in contact with none other than the boy genius himself, Boy Cavalier. He was promised vast riches and a new synthetic body in return for making sure the ship would end up crashing in Prodigy-owned territory, and he sold his soul. His sabotage continued by blowing the fuel tanks, leaving the ship running on fumes. Shmuel updates the situation further. Our fuel reserves are down to 8%. In 24 hours, the ship turns from missile to arrow. Matters with the specimens don't get any better. The xenomorph has burst from Bronsky's chest, escaped from the cryotube, and is somewhere loose on the ship. Worse still, the blood-sucking ticks, species 19, and the parasitic eyeball, Teocellus, have decided they want to join the party too. Up to this point in this series, we've already seen a decent amount of the Teocellus, or Image if you prefer, but really haven't seen all too much of the ticks, save for a moment in the first episode. Here in episode 5, we learn a little bit more about them and what they're capable of doing. According to Dr. Chibuzzo, the species lives off oxygen from blood, but do not feed off anything dead, no matter how hungry they get. That's her hypothesis anyway. After having deprived them of food for 2 weeks, she discovers they will feed on dead tissue after all. Though in order to feed off something living, they may have some sneaky abilities of their own. We see that one was able to open up its containment canister and make its way to Chibuzzo's thermos while she wasn't looking. And it only gets worse from there. Maybe these things are asexual, maybe not, but we see that it's able to spill out a large number of tadpole-like mini-ticks into Chibuzzo's drink. Working on the element of surprise, we closely watch that thermos, waiting for someone to take a drink, and later it would end up being Malachite, the engineer's apprentice. He chugs some of the water down after eating some spicy food, and it's not too long until he starts feeling the effects. Having an alien parasite inside your chest is no doubt a terrifying concept, but it's also pretty unnerving to think of all these tiny ticks inside your body. just crawling around, sucking up the blood from your organs. Poor Malachite, he vomits up blood, collapses, and is quickly brought into the medbay. This does not end well. We've seen the aftermath of this scene, both in quick flashes during the first episode and in episode 2 when Hermit and his team investigate the ship. Looking back on that now, the writing of the show clearly has some fun with managing expectations, leaving clues behind that may lead certain fans to assume one thing, only to have something different revealed. At the time, I believed that Malachite had a xenomorph inside him, which is what we saw on the screen, and he was killed in an attempt to remove it. I even believed that at some point the killer plant, the D. plumacari, must have gotten loose and killed Chibouzo. It didn't turn out that way. There was an attempt to remove a foreign body from the apprentice, but now we know it was the ticks. Chibouzo and Rahim try their best to remove them, but they won't come off without a very serious fight, almost ripping apart Malachite's organs in the process. And the ticks would happen to have their own unique defense mechanism. Not acid for blood, but when threatened in such a way, they release a toxic gas. Within seconds, the doctors are affected by it and choke to death while blood streams out of their eyes. Pretty fucking gruesome. My apologies to Species 19, I was not familiar with your game. Now, there is a moment between the ticks and the image that has become something of a topic of debate. The primary reason why one of the ticks is able to escape without notice in the first place is that Chibouzo is distracted by the Cryosleep. It begins tapping on the glass of its container with its little tentacles and draws her attention away. There are some who believe it intentionally distracted her to allow the tick to escape. There are others who believe it was actually trying to warn her. The logic there being, I guess, that if the ticks get loose and kill the humans, it won't have any hosts, and its own survival would be in doubt. I can understand that line of thinking and hearing the argument, but it never occurred to me while I was actually watching it. In fact, I was thinking it had gone even further in the other direction. Not only did it help by distracting Chibouzo, but maybe it was even in some way controlling the tick. You see the little tentacle going up as if it's guiding it, showing it what to do. We already know this highly intelligent creature can overtake the mind of a host and even create some kind of connection with something it even makes minimal contact with. Maybe the tick isn't actually all that intelligent, and it was the Cryosleep making some kind of psychic connection to a less intelligent, easily controllable creature within a close distance. I don't think that's completely out of the realm of possibility. As for the matter of whether it was warning or distracting Chibouzo, well, Noah Hawley himself did actually provide an answer for that. In another interview, published after the episode's airing, this time with Polygon, Hawley said the following: I think it was creating a distraction to allow the creature to do its thing. As you keep watching in the season, one might begin to suspect that this one species is smarter than the other ones, and that it thinks in a longer-term way. It is definitely a smart creature, and it uses that distraction to its advantage, as well as the unfortunate timing where Chibouzo, being called to a meeting in the mess hall, improperly secures its container. It's able to basically slingshot itself against the glass, causing it to fall over and break open. With all the excitement of the ticks causing complete chaos and killing 3 crew members, the rest of the surviving crew may have veered their attention away from the rapidly growing xenomorph aboard the ship. In this last portion of the episode, it's the xenomorph's time to shine, and it goes on its own rampage. It kills Mr. Tang, who is still secluded in the interrogation room, and then it sets its sights on Zaveri. This is a very good moment, and any kind of female character in the Alien series, especially one that rises into a position of authority such as she does, is going to draw comparisons, of course, to Ripley. It feels especially intentional here. The script takes full advantage of the natural inclination we may have to make that comparison, and once again it reshapes certain expectations. This actually helps in making Zaveri an interesting and unique character all on her own. Risha Murjani does a great job in leaning into this inspiration and also making this original character stand out. She is a character dealing with cruel circumstance, doing what she can. The script understands this, and it thrusts upon us the unsettling reality. Not everyone can be Ripley. And it isn't really a matter of the spirit. She has a similar drive, a similar determination, and survival instinct. But sometimes life just isn't fair. Sometimes you just can't win with the cards you're dealt. She was in a bad place emotionally due to the death of her lover. She was constantly at odds with the ship's cyborg security officer. She could not maintain control of her crew. We can almost see it in her eyes by the end, that she knows she has failed. Unfortunately, she doesn't survive. But I have to say, she does put up a good fight. She tries her best to survive the bloodthirsty xenomorph, and we can admire her for that, but maybe it was just Morrow who had the better hand in this case. To be fair, this is a Morrow-centric episode. He's in the spotlight here more than he's ever been, and Babu Sise is exceptional here. Seriously, let the Emmy campaign start right here, right now. This actor is an incredible revelation. Everything he does with the character continues to surprise and draw you in. He just keeps getting better and better. After watching each episode, I always like to listen to the official Alien Earth podcast and share some points of interest in my reviews. Cisse was a guest on the most recent episode, and he had a lot to say of his character and his acting approach, which I think is worth going over. Here's what Cisse says. He's a complicated character, and I love complicated characters. Some of the research that I did is I went and watched There Will Be Blood, checked out Daniel Day-Lewis's performance. I went and watched Javier Bardem again for like the 10th time in No Country for Old Men. And of course, those are phenomenal performances. But I was looking for clues as to how is this actor solving this problem. And I also watched, God rest him, Heath Ledger. I watched The Dark Knight again, and watched The Joker. And what's incredible is the way he moves in there. Like, everyone else is quite upright and stiff and ready to go, but he just kind of rolls around in these scenes, and I watched all of that and I thought, okay, I have to make a decision on how Morrow moves. And the clue is in that scene when he's talking to Mother, when he's trying to get into the impact room. He isn't rushing. He's keeping his head. He's got one sweat. He's humming. He's maintaining his pace because he knows if he rushes, he's going to ruin everything. And so once I had that set in, I thought, okay, great. Now, of course, not to spoil anything, but when Morrow needs to move quickly, he really does. If you imagine, at some point he was part of the Special Forces. This is how he's risen right up to the top. So he's put himself in extreme cold, extreme heat, extreme situations, and being able to take extreme situations without reacting. In a way, it's the simplicity of it. This is the situation I'm in. What does fear do to me? If I keep a clear head, I can do something useful. So I just went down that path of he's just got incredible strength of character. It's not that he's unfeeling, especially with the introduction of a daughter. I even feel that part of his lack of fear is to do with the fact that he's lost his daughter. So it puts him in that place where, what's worse than that? Cisse, and the show itself, can always find a way to tap into the humanity of these situations, which is tricky considering you're dealing with a half-human, half-machine like Morrow. Amongst all the chaos, and the suspense, and the gruesome creature action, the scene that may stand out the most is Morrow's when he reflects on his past life. He smokes his cigar, reading over old letters he's taken with him, and transmissions sent to him from Earth that he's printed off. We see back all those years ago with him and his daughter on the beach before he leaves. It's a quiet, emotional scene. He misses his daughter. But then the dagger through the heart. We see the last printed transmission sent to him, only 8 years into his 65-year mission. Mr. Morrow, this is to inform you that your daughter, Estelle, 19, died in a fire that destroyed her home on the 12th of April. Her effects have been placed in storage for you on your return in 53 years. It's not just that this is a terrible tragedy, but it being so coldly and matter-of-factly communicated just somehow makes it hurt all the more. It perfectly encapsulates this world where the corporation values its profit and power over human life, and it's the only world Morrow knows, one he will even fight for to his very last breath. This really is such a tragic character, and one perfectly written for the world of Alien. This scene hits hard, and so does the scene where Morrow escapes into the impact room, as you mentioned previously. We have seen this event before in the first episode, but it's recontextualized. The glimpses of his daughter appear in his mind. Wiping off the xenomorph slime is juxtaposed with wiping the tears from his eyes. The image of himself, hand in hand with his daughter, fades away. That life is gone. His only life now is for the company, and for the specimens. I'm impressed with how the show is so tactfully able to insert these kinds of moments. Not just with Morrow, but also the heavy emotions that Zaveri is keeping at bay. This wasn't just a torrid affair with Bronski, it does seem like she came to love him. He is a capsule of soil from back on Earth, which she pours over the cryopod, accepting that he's already dead at that point. In her moment of defeat, and apparent acceptance of her fate, she pours that out as well. Even with Shmuel, there's this great moment where he's looking into the medbay, watching over Malachite with such deep sadness. That wasn't just his apprentice, that was his buddy. There was even something of a child and father relationship going on there. When things go horribly wrong and everyone is dying inside, he fights to get into the medbay, but is held back by Morrow. It's actually kind of heartbreaking. This group of people have been working together for 65 years, maybe asleep in cryo for a good deal of it, but obviously a lot of time has been spent together. They work closely together, and of course connections and relationships are going to form. I think it's those human touches that only serve to heighten the expected horror and action scenes which inevitably come to the forefront. And I have to say, the horror and the action is done really, really well here. There's even a good old-fashioned shootout between Petrovich and Morrow. In the process, Clem is unfortunately shot in the head, leading to the ticks crawling inside the open wound, which is a pretty bad way to go out. But Morrow finally gets the upper hand on the Saboteur, finally taking him down in a pure T-1000 fashion, and I think that moment is worthy of applause. Then there's the whole brawl between the Xenomorph and Teos, which I loved. First, the Image fights against it with a human host, having overtaken Shmuel, and we get a pretty brutal takedown. The human host is killed, and it's very interesting to see this little eyeball just jumping around the Xenomorph, trying to find an opening to take over. But, of course, it can't, because the Xenomorph has no eyes. I'm reminded of a passage from the Alan Dean Foster novel adaptation of Alien 3. The alien shoved Clemen's spurting corpse aside and gazed down at Ripley. If only it had eyes, a part of her thought, instead of visual receptors as yet unstudied. No matter how horrible or bloodshot, at least you could connect with an eye. The windows of the soul, she'd read somewhere. The alien had no eyes, and, quite likely, no soul. Overall, I was very impressed with the episode, and I've often wondered, could you make a new entry in the Alien series that is closer to what we saw in the original 1979 film? The sequels have always tried for something different, and always built upon that initial idea. But could the same monster in the house, taking down the group one by one concept work today? I think this episode proves that yes it can, and it's able to do so by remaining true to those original elements, serving up some twists to them, and adding a good deal more of something new too. We have the additional aliens. We also have this whole mystery aspect of the Saboteur along with it, and we get involved with that. We have the doomed romance and the tragedy that befell it. We have a character like Morrow in the lead that, even placing the previous episodes aside and looking at this one on its own, we're not too sure of. But we slowly come to understand him and sympathize with him, even pitying him, as it draws back to the only purpose he has remaining in his tragic life: the company, Weyland-Yutani. This is where his loyalty lies, and this is what he'll be fighting for as we see the series continue. And I'm more eager now than ever to see what happens next. And I do have to wonder, with this episode being so different, almost like a standalone, did it have an appeal to those who maybe haven't cared for the series? Would this one single episode stand out as an exception, and could it be something that they'd enjoy? I would hope so, but of course you're always going to get complaints. One of the favorites for time immemorial seems to be of characters acting stupidly. Why are they so stupid doing this? Why didn't this character do this or that? Or this isn't logical, etc. You'll always get that, and you can determine for yourself the level of fairness to those arguments. You may have to figure, though, that a 65-year, very dangerous mission, which may have just good enough pay, may not appeal to everyone. Stupidity and incompetence will surely exist in the future, as it does today, regardless of rank or position. The company probably took what they could get in this case. Noah Hawley, also in his Polygon interview, sees the Maginot's crew for exactly who they are. They didn't send the A-team up there. They've got a doctor with a drug abuse history. They have a very idiosyncratic scientist. The captain has died. The chief science officer has died. A lot of these are the supporting players. They're all a little self-involved, for sure, but after 65 years, they're probably all a little crazy, too. What did you think of Alien Earth Season 1, Episode 5, In Space, No One? How does this rank for you in the episodes we've seen so far? Please comment below and share your thoughts. Thank you very much for watching today, and apologies for this being a little later than usual. I was on holiday while this aired, so I had some catching up to do. But I'm ready for the next episode, and I'm excited to see what's next, and hopefully if this video is uploaded in the time that I've aimed for, that will be tonight. As always, please be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest from Alien Theory. My very special thanks today goes out to Nicholas Butta, our Weyland-Yutani executive, and Gregory Ford, the Patreon Hive Praetorian. And thank you very much, Ben Katz, the Patreon Hive's queen. My very special thanks as always to Lady Anne in the Ellen Ripley Tier of Excellence. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for further information. You can also follow me on social media. Follow at Alien_Theory on X, formerly Twitter. Follow at Alien Theory YT on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off.